Hello, I'm Tricia Hillis. I'm the Bishop of Soda and Man, the Church of England's smallest diocese, but surely one of its most beautiful too. And I want to welcome you to Conversations with Jesus, a series of podcasts especially for the season of Lent. The chief tax collector.
Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost."
Now, Jesus had a history with tax collectors. Matthew, one of Jesus' close disciples, had been a tax collector. When called to follow Jesus, Matthew gave a great banquet to which he called a huge crowd of other tax collectors. This did not please the Pharisees and scribes, who commented about the company Jesus kept with the tax collectors and sinners. Oh, the company that Jesus keeps, then and now. Jesus arrived in Jericho and was not planning to stop. He was on his last journey to Jerusalem, and Jericho was the gateway to his death. Jericho is about 15 miles northeast of Jerusalem, near the Jordan River. At the time, it was a wealthy, important customs centre on a trade route between Jerusalem and the east, and was known as an oasis city. Herod the Great built his winter palace near here because of its warm climate and fresh water springs. Catering to the rich and the powerful, Jericho was a good place to encounter the well-to-do traders and political elites. An ideal spot then for an ambitious tax collector. Open to exploiting others for his own purposes. Zacchaeus' occupation would have made him very rich, but also a target of hatred for the Jews, since this put him in league with their Roman occupiers. Tax collectors of the time were regarded as traitors willing to be employed by the enemy, in this case the Romans, and whose work collecting taxes for the Romans, the enemy occupiers, was an open betrayal of their own people. In Jericho, Zacchaeus held the position of chief tax collector, probably with assistants working under him. Typically, he would be making money on the side, in addition to his legitimate collections. He'd be making even more from the tax collectors working under him. Imagine the thoughts of his neighbours as his house became more and more lavish, his clothes became finer, food richer. Everyone knew that this was their money, and there was nothing that they could do about it. Now Jesus was approaching. Zacchaeus had heard about this prophet from Nazareth and his reputation. Perhaps he'd heard that there was a former tax collector in Jesus' bands of companions. The hubbub grows, only increasing when Jesus stopped on the way into the city to heal a blind man who'd been begging by the road. Zacchaeus simply had to see for himself whom this Jesus was. However, the gathering crowd, his own small stature, and the fact that few would want to help him meant that to see Jesus would not be so easy. So he took the only sensible option. What followed turned Zacchaeus around. Amazingly, Zacchaeus joyfully accepts Jesus' offer and of his own accord says that he will sell and give away half of all his possessions and make fourfold restitution to those whom he had wronged. It is a dramatic turnaround and would result in seriously reduced circumstances. But Zacchaeus had found something of infinitely more value, something that would cure the sickness of his heart. To Jesus, Zacchaeus was not a hopeless case. Jesus does not believe that traitor or tax collector is the final description of any person. Jesus has a vision of whom Zacchaeus could be. It tells us that what we hope is indeed true, that our lives are not summed up by our failures and wrongs. Jesus' vision is catching and affects Zacchaeus' own view of himself. So it is that Zacchaeus is moved to make amends, to be a new person. Jesus proclaims that salvation has come to the house of Zacchaeus. But it doesn't stay with Zacchaeus and has an impact beyond him into his community. I can't help but wonder what they made of this Scrooge-like transformation. Jesus did not call Zacchaeus to leave and follow him like Matthew had. Zacchaeus was called instead to live out his new life within his community. Would they be watching, bemused, wondering if this would last? And what would Zacchaeus have thought not much later on, as news filtered out of Jerusalem, along with the trade road, of the trial and the death of Jesus? Maybe he had been there. Had it all been worth it? Had he been foolish? And what of the rumours which followed? That Christ's death had not, after all, been the end. Zacchaeus' story invites us to reflect on the vision we have for our lives and the far greater vision God has for us. To ponder questions such as, what is it that I'm running after? Am I on the path that leads to wholeness and salvation? And what does this mean? What change of direction might I need to take, or where might I press forward? What might it mean to respond to Jesus' statement that he must dwell in my home today? And what impact does my faith in Jesus have on how I live within my community? Loving Lord, give us your vision, not only for our lives, but for our communities, and give us hope that you see us with your grace. Amen.